Lonesome Traveler, Chapter 2, Mexico, Felaheen. When you go across the border at Nogales, Arizona, some very severe looking American guards, some of them pasty faced with sinister steel rimmed spectacles, go scrounging through all your beat baggage for signs of the scorpion of scofflaw. You just wait patiently like you always do in America among those apparently endless policemen and their endless laws against, no laws for, but the moment you cross the little wire gate and you're in Mexico, you feel like you just sneaked out of school when you told the teacher you were sick and she told you could go home 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You feel as though you just could come home from Sunday morning church and you take off your suit and slip into your soft, worn, smooth, cool overalls to play. You look around and you see happy, smiling faces, or the absorbed, dark faces of worried lovers and fathers and policemen. You hear cantina music from across the little park of balloons and popsicles. In the middle of the park is a bandstand for concerts, actual concerts for the people, free. Generations of marimba players, maybe, or an Orozco jazz band playing Mexican anthems to El Presidente. You walk thirsty through the swinging doors of a saloon and get a bar beer, and turn around and there's fellas shooting pool, cooking tacos, wearing sombreros, some wearing guns on their rancher hips, and gangs of singing businessmen throwing pesos at the standing musicians who wander up and down the room. It's a great feeling of entering the pure land, especially because it's so close to dry-faced Arizona and Texas and all over the Southwest. But you can find it, this feeling, this Felaheen feeling about life, that timeless gaiety of people not involved in great cultural and civilization issues. You can find it almost anywhere else, in Morocco, in Latin America, in Tyre, in Dakar, in Kerr land. There's no violence in Mexico. That was all a bull written up by Hollywood writers or writers who went to Mexico to be violent. I know of an American who went to Mexico for bar brawls because you don't usually get arrested there for disorderly conduct. My God, I've seen men wrestle playfully in the middle of the road blocking traffic, screaming with laughter as people walk by smiling. Mexico is generally gentle and fine, even when you travel among the dangerous characters as I did. Dangerous in the sense we mean in America. In fact, the further you go away from the border and deeper down, the finer it is, as though the influence of civilizations hung over the border like a cloud. The earth is an Indian thing. I squatted on it, rolled thick sticks of marijuana on sod floors of stick huts not far from Mazatlan, near the opium center of the world, and we sprinkled opium in our master joints. We had black heels. We talked about the revolution. The host was of the opinion the Indians originally owned North America just as well as South America. About time to come out and say, La tierra está la notre. The earth is ours. Which he did, clacking his tongue and with a hip sneer, hunching up his mad shoulders for us to see his doubt and mistrust of anyone understanding what he meant, but I was there and understood quite well. In the corner, an Indian woman, 18, sat, partly behind the table, her face in the shadows of the candle glow. She was watching us, either on O or herself as wife of a man who in the morning went out in the yard with a spear and split sticks on the ground, idly, languidly throwing it, ground down, half turning to gesture and say something to his partner. The drowsy hum of Felaheen village at noon. Not far away was the sea, warm, the tropical Pacific of Cancer. Spine-ribbed mountains all the way from Calixico and Shasta and Modoc, and Columbia River, Pasco viewing, sat rump behind the plain upon which this coast was laid. A 1,000-mile dirt road led there. Quiet buses, 1931, thin, high-style, goofy with old-fashioned clutch handles leading to floor holes, old side benches for seats, turned around, solid wood, bouncing in interminable dust down past the Navajoas, Margaritas, and General Pig desert dry huts of Dr. Pepper and Pig's Eye on tortilla half burnt, tortured road. Led to this, the capital of the world kingdom of opium. Ah, Jesus. I looked at my host. On the sod floor, in a corner, snored a soldier of the Mexican army. It was a revolution. The Indian was mad. La tierra está la notre. Enrique, my guide and buddy, couldn't say H, but had to say K, because his nativity was not buried in the Spanish name of Veracruz, his hometown, in the mistaken tongue instead. On buses joggling in eternity, he kept yelling at me, Esquert. Esquert. It means caliente, understand? Yeah. It's K-O-T. It's K-O-T. It means caliente. Heat. Is what letter? Alphabet? H. Is H-K? No, H. Is card for me to pronounce. I can do it. When he says K, his whole jaw leaped out. I saw the Indian in his face. He now squatted in the sod, explaining eagerly to the host, who by his tremendous demeanor I knew to be the king of some regal gang laid out in the desert, by his complete sneering speech concerning every subject brought up as if by blood king by right, trying to persuade or protect or ask for something. I sat, said nothing, watched like Gerardo in the corner. Gerardo was listening with astonished air at his big brother make a mad speech in front of the king, and under the circumstances of the strange Americano gringo with his sea bag. He nodded and leered like an old merchant, the host to hear it, and turned to his wife and showed his tongue and licked his lower teeth, and then damped top teeth on lip to make a quick sneer into the unknown Mexican dark overhead, the candlelight hut under Pacific Coast Tropic of Cancer stars like Acapulco fighting name. The moon washed rocks from El Capitan on down, the swamps of Panama later on, and soon enough, pointing with huge finger, the host, is the rib of mountains of the big plateau. The golds of war are buried deep, the caves bleed. We'll take the snake out of the woods. We'll tear the wings off the great bird. We shall live in the iron houses overturned in fields of rags. See, said our quiet friend from the edge of the pallet cot. Estrando, goatee, hip eyes drooping brown, sad and narcotic, opium, hands falling, strange witch doctor sitter next to of this king. Threw in occasional remarks that had the others listening, but whenever he tried to follow through, it was no go. He overdid something. He dulled them. They refused to listen to his elaborations and artistic touches in the brew. Primeval carnal sacrifice is what they wanted. No anthropologist should forget the cannibals or avoid the Auca. Get me a bow and arrow and I'll go. I'm ready now. Plain fare, please. Plain fare. Vacuous is the list. Nights grow bold, growing old, young night's dream. Soft. Our Indian king wanted nothing to do with tentative ideas. He listened to Enrique's real pleas, took note of Estrando's hallucinated sayings, guttural remarks, spicy thrown into pity like madness inward, and from which the king had learned all he knew of what reality would think of him. He eyed me with honest suspicion. In Spanish, I heard him ask if this gringo was some cop following him from L.A., some FBI man. I heard and said no. Enrique tried to tell him I was interesa, pointing at his own head to mean I was interested in things. I was trying to learn Spanish. I was ahead. Cabeza, also chucharro, pot smoker. Chucharro didn't interest King. In L.A., he'd gone walking in from the Mexican darkness on bare feet, palms out, black face to the lights. Somebody'd ripped a crucifix chain from his neck, some copper hoodlum. He snarled, remembering it. His revenge was either silent or someone was left dead, and I was the FBI man, the weird follower of Mexican suspects with records of having left feet prints on the sidewalks of Iron L.A. and chains in jailhouses and potential revolutionary heroes of late afternoon mustaches in the ready soft light. He showed me a pellet of O. I named it, partially satisfied. Enrique pleaded further in my defense. The witch doctor smiled inwardly. He had no time to goof or to court dances or sing of drink in whore alleys looking for pimps. He was Goethe in the court of Federico Weimar. Vibrations of television telepathy surrounded the room as silently the king decided to accept me. When he did, I heard the scepter drop in all their thoughts. And oh, the holy sea of Mazatlan and the great red plain of Eve with burros and asnos and red and brown horses and green cactus pulque. The three muchachas 2 miles away in a little group talking in the exact concentric center of the circle of the red universe. The softness of their speech could never reach us, nor these waves of Mazatlan destroy it by their bark. Soft sea winds to beautify the weed. 3 islands 1 mile out, rocks. The Felaheen city's muddy rooftops dusk in back. To explain, I'd missed the ship in San Pedro, and this was the midway point of the trip from the Mexican border at Nogales, Arizona, that I undertaken on cheap second-class buses all the way down the west coast to Mexico City. I'd met Enrique and his big kid brother, Gerardo, while the passengers were stretching their legs at desert huts in the Sonora Desert where the big fat Indian ladies served hot tortillas and meats off stone stoves. And as you stood there waiting for your sandwich, the little pigs grazed lovingly against your legs. Enrique was a great sweet kid with black hair and black eyes who was making this epic journey all the way to Veracruz, 2,000 miles away on the Gulf of Mexico with his kid brother for some reason I never found out. All he let me know was that inside his homemade wooden radio set was hidden about a half a pound of strong dark green marijuana with the moss still in it and long black hair in it, the sign of good pot. We immediately started blasting among the cacti in the back of the desert way stations, squatting there in the hot sun laughing as Gerardo watched. He was only 18 and wasn't allowed to smoke by his older brother. Is why? Because marijuana is bad for the eye and bad for la ley, bad for the eyesight and bad for the law. But you, pointing at me, Mexican saying you, and me, pointing at himself, we are right. He undertook to be my guide in the great trip through the continental spaces of Mexico. He spoke some English and tried to explain to me the epic grandeur of his land, and I certainly agreed with him. See, he'd say, pointing at distant mountain ranges, Mexico. The bus was an old, high, thin affair with wooden benches, as I say, and passengers in shawls and straw hats got on with their goats or pigs or chickens, while kids rode on the roof or hung on singing and screaming from the tailgate. We bounced and bounced over that 1,000-mile dirt road when we came to rivers and driver just plowed through the shallow water, washing off the dust, and bounced on. Strange towns like Navajoa, where I took a walk by myself and saw, in the market outdoor affair, a butcher standing in front of a pile of lousy beef for sale, flies swarming all over it while mangy, skinny Felaheen dogs scrounged around under the table. And towns like Los Mochis, the flies, where we sat drinking orange crush like grandees at sticky little tables, where the day's headline in the Los Mochis newspaper told of a midnight gun duel between the chief of police and the mayor. It was all over town, some excitement in the white alleys. Both of them with revolvers on their hips, bang, blam, right in the muddy street outside the cantina. Now we were in a town further south in Sinaloa, and had gotten off the old bus at midnight to walk single file through the slums and past the bars. Is no good you and me and Gerardo going to cantina is bad for la ley, said Enrique. And then Gerardo carrying my sea bag on his back like a true friend and brother. We crossed a great empty plaza of dirt and came to a bunch of stick huts forming a little village not far from the soft, starlit surf, and there we knocked on the door of that mustachioed wild man with the opium and were admitted to his candle-lit kitchen, where he and his witch doctor Goatee Estrando were sprinkling red pinches of pure opium into huge cigarettes of marijuana the size of a cigar. The host allowed us to sleep the night in the little grass, but nearby, This hermitage belonged to Estrando, who was very kind to let us sleep there. He showed us in by candlelight, removed his only belongings, which consisted of his opium stash under the pallet on the sod where he slept, and crept off to sleep somewhere else. We had only one blanket and tossed to see who would have to sleep in the middle. It was the kid Gerardo, who didn't complain. In the morning, I got up and peeked out through the sticks. It was a drowsy, sweet little grass hut village with lovely brown maids carrying jugs of water from the main well on their shoulders. Smoke of tortillas rose among the trees. Dogs barked. Children played. And as I say, our host was up and splitting twigs with a spear by throwing the spear at the ground, neatly parting the twigs, or thin boughs, clearly in half. An amazing sight. And when I wanted to go to the John, I was directed to an ancient stone seat which overlorded the entire village like some king's throne, and there I had to sit in full sight of everybody. It was completely in the open. Mothers passing by and smiled politely. Children stared with fingers in mouth. Young girls hummed at their work. We began packing to get back on the bus and carry on to Mexico City, but first I bought a quarter pound of marijuana. But as soon as the deal was done in the hut, a file of Mexican soldiers and a few city policemen came in with sad eyes. I said to Enrique, "Hey, are they going to be arrested?" He said, "No, they just wanted some of the marijuana for themselves, free, and would let us go peaceably." So Enrique cut them into about half of what we had, and they squatted all around the hut and rolled joints on the ground. I was so sick on an opium hangover, I lay there staring at everybody, feeling like I was about to be skewered, have my arms cut off, hung upside down on the cross, and burnt at the stake on that high stone John. Boys brought me soup with hot peppers in it, and everybody smiled as I sipped it, lying on my side. It burnt into my throat, made me gasp, cough and sneeze, and instantly I felt better. We got up, and Gerardo again heaved my sea bag to his back. Enrique hid the marijuana in his wooden radio. We shook hands with our host, and the witch doctor solemnly shook hands seriously and solemnly with every one of the 10 policemen and cop soldiers, and off we went single file again in the hot sun towards the bus station in town. "Now," said Enrique, patting the homemade radio, "see, Mir, we all set to get high." The sun was so hot and we were sweating. We came to a large, beautiful church in the old Spanish mission style, and Enrique said, "We go in here now." It amazed me to remember that we were all Catholics. We went inside and Gerardo kneeled first. Then Enrique and I kneed the pews and did the sign of the cross, and he whispered in my ear, "See, it's cool in the church. It's good to get away from the sun a minuto." At Mazatlan at dusk, we stopped for a while for a swim in our underwear in that magnificent surf, and it was there, on the beach, with a big joint smoking in his hand, where Enrique turned and pointed inland at the beautiful green fields of Mexico and said, "See the 3 girls in the middle of the field far away?" And I looked and barely saw 3 dots in the middle of a distant pasture. "3 muchachas," said Enrique. "It means Mexico." He wanted me to go to Veracruz with him. "I'm a shoemaker by trade. You stay home with the girls while I work, Mir. You write you interesa books and we get lots of girls." I never saw him after Mexico City because I had no money, absolutely, and I had to stay on William Seward Burroughs' couch, and Burroughs didn't want Enrique around. "You shouldn't hang around with these Mexicans. They're all a bunch of con men." I still have the rabbit's foot Enrique gave me when he left. A few weeks later, I go to see my first bullfight, which I must confess is a novillera, a novice fight, and not the real thing they show in the winter, which is supposed to be so artistic. Inside it is a perfect round bowl with a neat circle of brown dirt being harrowed and raked by expert-loving rakers like the man who rakes second base in Yankee Stadium, only this is the Bite the Dust Stadium. When I sat down, the bull had just come in and the orchestra was sitting down again. Fine embroidered clothes tightly fitted to boys behind a fence. Solemn they were, as a big, beautiful, shiny black bull rushed out galumphing from a corner. I hadn't looked where he'd been apparently mooing for help. Black nostrils and big white eyes and outspread horns, all chest, no belly, stove-polished thin legs seeking to drive the earth down with all that locomotive weight above. Some people sniggered. Bull galloped and flashed. You saw the riddled-up muscle holes in his perfect prize skin. Matador stepped out and invited, and the bull charged and slammed in. Matador sneered his cape, let pass the horns by his loins a foot or two. Got the bull revolved around by cape and walked away like a grandee, and stood his back to the dumb perfect bull who didn't charge like in blood and sand and lift Senor Grandee into the upper deck. Then business got underway. Out comes the old pirate horse with patch on eye, picador knight aboard with a lance, to come and dart a few slivers of steel in the bull's shoulder blade, who responds by trying to lift the horse, but the horse is mailed, thank God. A historical and crazy scene, except suddenly you realize the picador has started the bull on this interminable bleeding. The blinding of the poor bull and mindless vertigo is continued by the brave, bow-legged little dart man carrying 2 darts with ribbon. Here he comes head-on at the bull head-on for him. Wham! No head-on crash, for the dart man has stung with dart and darted away before you can say boo. And I did say boo, because a bull is hard to dodge. Good enough. But the darts now have the bull streaming with blood like Marlowe's Christ in the heavens. An old matador comes out and tests the bull with a few capes turn. Then another set of darts, a battle flag now shining down the living, breathing, suffering bull's side, and everybody glad. And now the bull's charge is just a stagger, and so now the serious hero matador comes out for the kill as the orchestra goes one boom lick on bass drum. It get quiet like a cloud passing over the sun. You hear a drunkard's bottle smash a mile away in the cruel Spanish green aromatic countryside. Children pause over tortas. The bull stands in the sun, head bowed, panting for life, his sides actually flapping against his ribs, his shoulders barbed like San Sebastian. The careful-footed matador, youth, brave enough in his own right, approaches and curses, and the bull rolls around and comes stoggling on wobbly feet at the red cape, dives in with blood streaming every which way, and the boy just accommodates him through the imaginary hoop and circles and hangs on tiptoe, knock-kneed. And Lord, I didn't want to see his smooth-tight belly ranted by no horn. He rippled his cape away at the bull, who just stood there thinking, oh, why can't I go home? And the matador moved closer, and now the animal bunched tired leg to run, but one leg slipped, throwing up a cloud of dust. But he dove in and flounced off to rest. The matador draped his sword and called the humble bull with glazed eyes. The bull pricked his ears and didn't move. The matador's whole body stiffened like a board that shakes under the trample of many feet. A muscle showed in his stocking. Bull plunged a feeble 3 feet and turned in dust, and the matador arched his back in front of him, like a man leaning over a hot stove to reach for something on the other side and flip his sword a yard deep into the bull's shoulder blade separation. Matador walked one way, bull the other, with sword to hilt, and staggered, started to run, looked up with human surprise at the sky and sun, and then gargled, oh, go see it, folks. He threw up 10 gallons of blood into the air, and it splashed all over. He fell on his knees, choking on his own blood, and spewed and twisted his neck around, and suddenly got floppy doll and his head blammed fat. He still wasn't dead. An extra idiot ran out and knifed him with a wren-like dagger in the neck. Nerve, and still the bull dug the sides of his poor mouth in the sand and chewed old blood. His eyes, oh, his eyes. Idiot sniggered because the dagger did this, as though it would not. A team of hysterical horses were rushed out to chain and drag the bull away. They galloped off, but the chain broke, and the bull slid in dust like a dead fly kicked unconsciously by a foot. Off with him! He's gone, white eyes staring, the last thing you see. Next bull! First, the old boys shovel blood in a wheelbarrow and rush off with it. The quiet raker returns with his rake. Ole! Girls throwing flowers at the animal murderer in the fine breeches. And I saw how everybody dies and nobody's going to care. I felt how awful it is to live just so you can die like a bull trapped in a screaming human ring. Hayalai, Mexico. Hayalai. The last day I'm in Mexico, I'm in the little church near Redondas in Mexico City, 4 o'clock in the gray afternoon. I've walked all over town delivering packages at the post offices, and I've munched on fudge candy for breakfast, and now, with 2 beers under me, I'm resting in the church contemplating the void. Right above me is a great tormented statue of Christ on the cross. When I first saw it, I instantly sat under it. After a brief standing hand-clasped look at it, Jeanne, they call me in the courtyard, and it's for some other lady. I run to the door and look out. Mon Jésus, I'm saying. And I look up, and there he is. They've put on him a handsome face like young Robert Mitchum, and I have closed his eyes in death, though one of them is slightly open, you think, and it also looks like young Robert Mitchum, or Enrique high on tea looking at you through the smoke and saying, Hombre, man, this is the end. His knees are all scratched, so hard sore they've scathed wore out through, an inch deep the hole where his kneecap's been whaled away by flailing falls on them with the big flail cross 100 miles long on his back, and as he leans there with the cross on rocks, they goad him on to slide on his knees, and he's sworn them out by the time he's nailed to the cross. I was there. Shows the big rip in his ribs where the sword tips of lancers were stuck up at him. I was not there. Had I been there, I would have yelled, Stop it, and got crucified too. Here, Holy Spain has sent the blood-heart sacrificed Aztecs of Mexico a picture of tenderness and pity, saying, This you would do to man? I am the son of man. I am of man. I am man, and this you would do to me, who am man and God? I am God, and you would pierce my feet bound together with long nails with big stay-fast points on the end slightly blunted by the hammerer's might? This you did to me, and I preached love. He preached love, and you would have him bound to a tree and hammered into it with nails? You fools, you should be forgiven. It shows the blood running from his hands to his armpits and down his sides. The Mexicans have hung a graceful canopy of red velvet around his loins. It's too high a statue for there to have been pinners of metals on that holy victory cloth. What a victory, the victory of Christ. Victory over madness, mankind's blight. Kill him. They still roar at fights, cockfights, bullfights, prize fights, street fights, field fights, air fights, word fights. Kill him. Kill the fox, the pig, and the pox. Christ, in his agony, pray for me. It shows his body falling from the cross on his hands of nails. The perfect slump built in by the artist, the devout sculptor who worked on this with all his heart, the compassion and tenacity of a Christ, a sweet, perhaps Indian, Spanish Catholic of the 15th century, among ruins of adobe and mud and stink smokes of Indian mid-millennium in North America, devised this Statuo del Cristo and pinned it up in the new church which now, 1950s, 400 years later or 5, has lost portions of the ceiling where some Spanish Michelangelo has run up cherubs and angel kins for the edification of upward gazers on Sunday mornings when the kind padre expostulates on the details of the law religious. I pray on my knees so long, looking up sideways at my Christ, I suddenly wake up in a trance in the church with my knees aching and with a sudden realization that I've been listening to a profound buzz in my ears that permeates throughout the church and throughout my ears and head and throughout the universe, the intrinsic silence of purity, which is divine. I sit in the pew quietly, rubbing my knees. The silence is roaring. Ahead is the altar. The Virgin Mary is white in a field of blue and white and golden arrangements. It's too far to see adequately. I promise myself to go forward to the altar as soon as some of the people leave. The people are all women, young and old, and suddenly here come two children in rags and blankets and barefooted walking slowly down the right-hand aisle with the big boy laying his hand anxiously holding something on his little brother's head. I wonder why. They're both barefooted, but I hear the clack of heels. I wonder why. They go forward to the altar, come around the side to the glass coffin of a saint statue, all the time walking slowly, anxiously, touching everything, looking up, crawling infinitesimally around the church and taking it all in completely. At the coffin, the littler boy, 3 years old, touches the glass and goes around to the foot of the dead and touches the glass, and I think, they understand death. They stand there in the church under the skies and have a beginningless past and go into the never-ending future, waiting themselves for death at the foot of the dead in a holy temple. I get a vision of myself and the two little boys hung up in a great endless universe with nothing overhead and nothing under but the infinite nothingness, the enormousness of it. The dead without number in all directions of existence, whether inward into the atom worlds of your own body or outward to the universe, which may only be one atom in an infinity of atom worlds, and each atom world only a figure of speech. Inward, outward, up and down, nothing but emptiness and divine majesty and silence for the two little boys and me. Anxiously, I watch them leave. To my amaze, I see a little tiny girl 1 foot or me and a half high, 2 years old or 1.5, waddling tinily lowly beneath them, a meek little lamb on the floor of the church. Anxiousness of big brother was to hold a shawl over her head. He wanted little brother to hold his hand. Between them and under the canopy marched Princesa, sweetheart, examining the church with her big brown eyes, her little heels clacking. As soon as they're outside, they play with the other children. Many children are playing in the garden-enclosed entryway. Some of them are standing and staring at the upper front of the church, at images of angels in rain-dimmed stone. I bow to all this, kneel at my pew entryway, and go out, taking one last look at Saint Antoine de Padua, Saint Anthony, Santo Antonio de Padua. Everything is perfect on the street again. The world is permeated with roses of happiness all the time, but none of us know it. The happiness consists in realizing that it is all a great, strange dream.